I notified Commissioner Delaney about everything you told me. He wants you to stay right where you are.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about 1973's Serpico. And we're also here to talk about its brand new Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray release that just came out. But first, before we dive into all that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, and now we do podcasts, if you're into all that, then this is the channel for you, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So celebrating 50 years this year, Sidney Lumet's Serpico, starring Al Pacino as Frank Serpico, tells the tale of a New York City NYPD cop back in the 60s all the way through 1971. He did 11 years on the force, and this is a true story. It's about how he became a whistleblower to expose corruption in the NYPD in the 1960s and early 1970s. He's considered responsible for changing the entire culture of the New York Police Department. And this film depicts that entire journey from the time he's a rookie cop till the time he gets shot and leaves the force. Now, this is a completely true story. I'm sure some of this is over-exaggerated for the screen, but I'm telling you, while watching this film, you do not feel that at all, because that's what you hire Sidney Lumet for. Sidney Lumet is the director of this, and he's directed so many great classic films, some that are my personal favorites, including 12 Angry Men and The Verdict, which I think are his best films. But this is the same guy who also gave us Network, The Wiz, Dog Day Afternoon. He is one of the greatest directors to ever live, and what he does best, I think, is creating realism in all his movies and creating, like, real environments, places that feel lived in. I think that's what you hire Sidney Lumet for, is for that realism take that he brings to all of his movies. All of his characters seem like real people, and in this case, Serpico is a real person, so hiring him to direct this film seems like the perfect choice. It just blows my mind looking it up now that the only Academy Award that Sidney Lumet ever won was an honorary Academy Award. I think he had 14 films that were nominated for Academy Awards, but this man never won Best Director, even though I could argue that he is probably one of the top 5 greatest directors to ever live. 12 Angry Men came out in the 50s, but that is one of the best films, if not the best film of the 1950s. And you can argue that the 1960s were a little bit of a downtime for him, but in the 1970s, Sidney Lumet gave us some of the greatest films. You know, Network might not be my favorite movie of all time, but there is stuff in Network that is just some of the greatest stuff ever put on film.
And DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon, those are the nations of the world today.
And there's a reason why all of his films still hold up to this day, and they were very ahead of their time, their subject matter. In the 1970s, that's when we were really starting to get a little bit more down and gritty, getting away from the Hays Code of the 1960s. But even in the 1950s, 12 Angry Men, what that was trying to show, was very ahead of its time. And that movie's actually getting a Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray release this week as well. So we're getting a lot of Sidney Lumet films this week. But Serpico, you know, I never was the biggest fan of Serpico. I felt like it's not the best paced film out of all of his films. And also, you know, he's got to struggle with the fact we already know how this movie ends. You know, this is a true story now that's 50 years old. So he's got to really tell this tale in the most cinematic way possible. And I think that you get that right out of the gate with one of the better opening scenes that just tells you the entire story of this film that we're going to see. It starts in present day, present 1973 that is, where Frank Serpico has just been shot. In the beginning of this film, we don't know who Frank Serpico is, but we can see everybody's reactions to him getting shot. Some are shocked, some aren't that surprised at all, and as the viewer, we don't know yet why that is. And then we transition into him as a rookie cop, and now his journey through the police force from a beat cop all the way to detective, but never a gold shield detective. That's a big theme throughout this movie too, is he's always working his way to detective. You know, he becomes a plainclothes cop early in this movie, which means he starts wearing those ridiculous Serpico outfits that I'm a huge Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan. You guys have heard us talk about that on here, and Charlie Day does a great impression as Charlie Kelly, as Frank Serpico on the show.
Everybody's a crooked cop, huh? Am I the only cop left in Philadelphia who ain't crooked?
And the clothes he's wearing, you would think that's an over-exaggeration, but it's not. Frank Serpico's choices of outfits are some of the most outlandish, ridiculous clothes you'll ever see. I wish I could pull them off, but I don't understand what he was thinking, because I thought the goal of an undercover cop was to appear undercover and blend in. I don't think his outfits are blending in. Now, I wasn't around in the 1960s, so it's very possible that these clothes did blend in. You know, that's the time of the flower power hippie movement. And a couple of Serpico's fellow cops do call him a hippie, but you would think that he would choose some more plain clothes. Those outfits are a little bit ridiculous, but still awesome in my opinion. And this movie is just showing us how every which way he turns, Frank Serpico is trying to do the right thing, the honorable thing, the thing he signed up to do, to be an honorable cop. And they even show you in the beginning, they read to you out loud as you're becoming an NYPD cop. You know, how you're supposed to protect integrity and honor and, you know, serve the people. And as we go through the movie, we see that Frank Serpico is very willing to do that, but nobody else around him is. No matter which way he turns, there's just corruption, there's greed. You know, everyone wants a little bit of extra. They're always taking money on the side, and they get really uncomfortable with the fact that Frank Serpico himself will not take that money. But he's not willing to rat them out at the beginning. He just kind of wants to ignore it. It's them feeling uncomfortable with the fact that he won't take the money that he is going to rat, that now he's forced into a situation where he has to bring this to higher up the ladder. The problem is, no matter which way he goes up that ladder, they're always going to protect their own, they're always going to protect the other cops, and Serpico has nowhere to turn. And you know, I am not a police officer, but I can honestly relate to the sense that when you are a low-level employee somewhere and you try and bring issues up to upper management, that they do get ignored and they do get blown off, because then it reflects badly on them, and they're out to protect their own jobs and their own careers. We see that a lot in this movie with the one cop trying to say, you know, I have a family, I have kids, you speaking up is going to cause problems for me and my family, but it's either like, do this or you're the enemy for bringing it up. And that's pretty much what they're showing. Like, Serpico is doing the honest and honorable thing, but because everybody else isn't, he is the enemy to everybody else. Because this is a systematic problem. And, you know, we see this in the world today, 50 years later, where not just in police forces, just in any walk of life where there are systematic issues that we have to buck the system to change, because the system is just so messed up and so far gone that it's going to take way more than one person to change it. So Serpico becomes a whistleblower. Unfortunately, he has to eventually leave the police force. Things aren't going to change, but also people aren't going to trust him anymore. That's one thing about being a whistleblower. You were accepting your fate as that. People just naturally aren't going to trust you anymore, because they believe in their hearts that you are going to rat them out even if they do the littlest thing. Even though that Serpico shows throughout this film, that is not what he is going to do. He's just trying to do the right thing, what he signed up to do. And in a world filled with dishonest people, when you see an honest person, they're the ones who stand out, and that just shows you the flaws in the system, and that's what this movie is trying to illustrate to you. And at the time of this release back in 1973, police officers were not happy with this film. You know, this was only 2 years after he gives that big speech about corruption in the police force, so you can imagine how that went. And it's really crazy, actually, how fast of a turnaround. We had a book for this and then a film. So it was a pretty huge story back in the 1970s. You know, I wish I could sit here and tell you today that, you know, things are better in the world, but as long as human greed exists, things like this will always continue to happen. And this film in general, if you haven't seen Serpico, it is one of the most powerful movies that you'll ever see. Is it the most entertaining film you'll ever see? No, I don't think it's one of Sidney Lumet's best films, but it is still a phenomenal film. It is one of the films that you should see, one of the best films of the 1970s. From a cinematography standpoint, it is amazing. And we haven't even talked about how good of an actor Al Pacino is. I mean, it goes without saying, he did win a Golden Globe for this performance, and he is phenomenal in this movie, and it's right in the middle of the two Godfather movies, Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, and in this one, he plays a very different character, but you see the yelling, those acting chops that we know from the Godfather movies where he plays Michael Corleone, but it's such a different character. It's really cool, and I can imagine back in 1973 when you saw this film, it was very jarring to see Al Pacino play the role like this. What a performance by him, and it's really a shame that it took all the way until 1992, Scent of a Woman, for Al Pacino to get an Oscar, because he at least should have won one for one of his 1970s films, but, you know, unfortunately, we know the Academy, that's just not gonna happen. We gotta earn that with 7 or 8 more Academy Award-winning performances. That's just the way it goes sometimes, unfortunately. But we're also here today to talk about this new 4K Blu-ray that just came out from Kino Lorber, and that's what we're gonna do right now.
Let's face it, who can trust a cop who don't take money?
Alright, here it is. Like I said, Kino Lorber actually has 2 Sidney Lumet films coming out this week. This one and 12 Angry Men. Now, I opted to grab this one, and the reason is because I already have 12 Angry Men on the Criterion Collection, and, you know, I don't know if it's going to be the biggest upgrade from that to the 4K Blu-ray. I do want to check it out eventually, maybe when it goes on sale, but I couldn't justify paying full price for a film that I already own, and one that I expect will not have as good of extras, because Kino Lorber, one thing they do not do the greatest of extras, which is usually a little bit of a disappointment. But what they do is some amazing transfers, and let me just tell you right now, Serpico is no different. But before we dive into that, let's check out the slipcover. Your standard Kino Lorber slipcover, which I always will praise. I love that all their stuff is uniform. They don't really seem to stray too far from the pack. Sometimes I complain about that from other studios, but they like to keep their stuff uniform, and I can appreciate that. And as long as they put on these nice slipcovers, I'm definitely happy with that. You get the same artwork underneath. Kino Lorber also doesn't do reversible art, so don't expect to have that in here. You get all your stats on the back. And then inside you get one 4K disc, one Blu-ray disc with Kino Lorber's standard disc design on there, which again, they don't do. I love individual disc design, but Kino Lorber likes to keep all of their stuff uniform. And, you know, as long as they keep doing that, I could appreciate that, because everything will look nice on my shelf and you can know, oh, okay, that's a Kino Lorber 4K. I keep them all together on my shelf and it does look really nice, so I could definitely appreciate them doing that. Do I appreciate individual disc design a little bit more? Absolutely, but it's nothing worth complaining about. And as far as visuals go, this is going to be presented to you in the 1.85 aspect ratio. That means it's going to fill up your entire screen. It's got HDR10 and Dolby Vision on it. I compared them both. They were both very comparable. Not too much of a difference between the Dolby Vision and the HDR10. Not enough to really notice a huge difference. The Dolby Vision, I think, was slightly better, but gun to my head, it's really hard to choose which one was better, but they both do look phenomenal. This scan is gorgeous. It's the best that this has ever looked. There was very little film grain. The HDR and the Dolby Vision really do some work. This is a 1973 film. It's 50 years old, so it's not the most visually stunning film, and by design, this film isn't the most visually stunning film. You know, it takes place in 1960s New York, so everything is gritty and dark. The color palette, you know, is a lot of those greens, grays, beiges, just dark, flat colors. Nothing that's like gonna really catch your eye. You know, some of Serpico's outfits are, you know, might catch your eye, but that's just because of how they look, not color-wise. It's not the most colorful film, and it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be down and dirty and gritty and look like 1960s New York, which wasn't the prettiest place to be. So it doesn't look that pretty on film, but this film, the resolution, crisp and clear. There's certain shots, like a very, you know, on the cover actually, this shot in the film looked phenomenal on 4K because they linger on his face and you could just see like the dents and any little bits of pieces on Al Pacino's face. Like you could just see the full detail on his face, the full detail on his hair. Now in that same scene though, they do a two-shot, and the guy that they cut to, he's a little bit further away. It's not in as much of a close-up, and that looked a little bit rougher than that. So my issues with the 4K's visuals seem to only be a source material thing. Like I said, again, a 50-year-old film, so some scenes will not look as good as other scenes, but the scenes that really do shine, like the opening scene, like just the opening scene alone in the rain, you'll notice a big jump from any previous versions of this film you have seen. Now, there was a Blu-ray back in 2017. I don't own that Blu-ray, so I don't know how much of a jump it is from that, but every other version of this film that I have seen, this was a pretty damn big jump. And you also have in here a packed-in Blu-ray, which is just a compressed-down 4K, and that Blu-ray did look really good. Actually, it wasn't that far off from the 4K, in my opinion. You know, it still was a damn good Blu-ray, and if they did sell them separately, and I did check to see they don't, so right now you can only get that Blu-ray in this pack in 4K. If you look at that scan, it's a pretty good scan, and it's pretty much worth just buying the Blu-ray if you're not a huge fan of this film, but I'm very happy I grabbed this 4K visually. It is still an upgrade from that Blu-ray, but it's not the biggest upgrade. So if you're one of those people who don't watch the 4K and you just buy it for the Blu-ray, it is a pretty damn good Blu-ray in here. It's definitely one of the nicer ones that I've seen as far as a pack-in Blu-ray. Now, one thing that's weird about the audio is you can't actually, it doesn't tell you what audio tracks there are. When you click on it, it just says 5.1 or 2.0. So you get a 5.1 audio track or 2.0. Now those are DTS audio tracks and they're the same on the 4K and the Blu-ray. But it's just weird that they didn't have a list of the audio tracks like they usually do. It's like, you know, it felt very much like an older Blu-ray. It didn't feel like what Kino Lorber usually does in their menu system. I was pretty surprised. It was just a little pop-up saying pick 5.1 or 2.0. Usually they give you a little bit more description in there. And the audio track was fine. I didn't feel like the 5.1 added too much more over that mono track. You know, it didn't make great use of the rears, but again, it feels like this was just a 5.1 that they kind of just took the mono track and just added little bits to make use of your other speakers, but it didn't feel like a full-fledged mono. It didn't feel like a full-fledged 5.1 to me, and again, it's a 50-year-old film, so I imagine that is the reason why. It still was crisp and clear. I set the volume at whatever volume I wanted to set it at, and I enjoyed it throughout. I never had to pick up my remote. The audio was crisp and clear. I had no issues, no pops or nothing like that. You know, it's that 1970s audio, so there are times when the audio track might seem a little bit louder than everything else. And then actually, this is not a fault of the audio track, it's just kind of a fault of the film, but the score sometimes was just a little too loud in scenes. This movie seems very score heavy, and for the 1970s, that was definitely a choice. Back then, they would not really use score in scenes too much, but in this film, they really do. Anytime characters are talking, they do a lot of the time put score over, and it's just slightly too loud for my liking. Now, again, it's not the 4K's fault, it's just the film in general, because I have seen that every other time I've seen the film. I thought they would adjust it, but I guess you don't adjust something like that. You know, that was Sidney Lumet's choice. He's since passed away, and you don't want to just change something without somebody who's not alive's permission. This is how he designed the film, and most people probably wouldn't complain about that, but it's just something that I noticed, and clearly that must mean that Christopher Nolan loves that too, because he's a huge fan of turning the dialogue down and turning up the score, or background noise. So I guess he's a huge fan of this movie. So overall, it's a solid audio track. It's not the best. It's nothing too special. It's nothing that's going to stand out in the crowd. The visuals are great. You know, they're definitely the best this movie has ever looked. Don't expect it to look like a more modern 4K, or even some of the best older films that are brought to 4K. It's not one of those. It's just a really solid one. I could say it was definitely, if you're a Kino Lorber fan, I think it's a better 4K than Marathon Man, and it's comparable to Death Wish, which are also 1970s films that Kino Lorber brought to 4K, and I would say it's definitely in line with those, but a little better than Marathon Man, about the same as Death Wish, so pretty solid, just nothing too special. Now the extras, this is what Kino Lorber loves to do. They love to pack it full of extras, but they're all mostly just trailers, small featurettes. There is a good audio commentary track on here you should check out, and the featurettes are like 15 to 20 minutes each. That could have been edited together into a way better hour and a half, 2 hour documentary, in my opinion, because each one, yeah, it concentrates on a certain subject, but I don't know, it just feels a little unfocused. They weren't my favorite featurettes. I did enjoy them, and, you know, gave me some more insight to the film, but, you know, you got actors talking about Al Pacino, but we don't have an Al Pacino interview. That would have been cool. He's the star of the film. But I understand it's Al Pacino, so you get really just a bunch of this one with a New York City detective talking about, or I think maybe he was the commissioner, I'm not too sure, but he works for the NYPD, the guy talking about what Serpico did for the police department in general, and Al Pacino, how he invited him to his Montauk house, and they, you know, basically Al Pacino picked Frank Serpico's mind from the time he was a rookie cop until the time he left, and, you know, it's pretty damn close. It's only about, this movie came out 2 years after he left the force, I'm sure, so really quick turnaround on this film, and Al Pacino diving into that guy's headface. That's what you get Al Pacino for. You know, they only put that on there really just to fluff up the extras, to make it look like they put more extras on there. You don't need to do that, like I said in previous reviews. The trailers, it's 2023. Most people could just go watch those on YouTube. Now, there are people like Matt who actually do watch trailers, that if they go before the movie starts, he'll watch them, and maybe he'll grab a movie that way. But I can't imagine too many people going into the menus and looking at trailers on here. But hey, I could be wrong. Please let me know in the comment section if I am. You know, it wouldn't be the first time I was wrong, and it damn sure won't be the last. So let me know. So overall, what would I rate this out of 10? I think this is a really solid release from Kino Lorber. It's really one of their standard releases, falls in line with a lot of their other stuff that I'm very happy with. It's nothing too special, but it's definitely not bad. So overall, I'm going to give this a really solid 8.5 out of 10. All my complaints are like my usual complaints with Kino Lorber. I would have liked some more extras, some more focused extras. You know, the audio track I think could have been a little bit better, but it's nothing worth complaining about. There's just nothing on here that is worth complaining about. Everything is standard, everything is good. It's, you know, it's still better than a regular studio release in my opinion. You know, they definitely put a lot of effort into it, and visually, especially for a film like this that again looks down and dirty and gritty intentionally, so to clean that up and bring it to a modern audience, hopefully a modern audience that can enjoy this film, because I do think it's an important film, even if it's not the most entertaining film. I think this is definitely one you should see, because I do think it's an important film, and I do think that Al Pacino's performance stands out in the crowd, and it's a real shame he was nominated, but it didn't win Best Actor that year. But, you know, that was his tale through the entire 1970s. Nominated, never win. Not until we get to Scent of a Woman, that is. Which I don't think he should have won that year, because Denzel Washington and Malcolm X should have beat him that year. But you know what, I guess we gotta make up for the fact that this guy played Michael Corleone and never got his Academy Award for that. So go figure. But before we end today's video, it's also Monday, and that means it's time for us to do our digital code giveaway. So in Friday's video, I asked you guys 2 questions. All you had to do was answer one of those questions in the comment section below. Then you come back to this video. We put your name on a magic wheel. We spin that wheel 2 times. And the 2 names that it lands on, those are your 2 lucky winners. And they will have their choice of the digital codes that you have seen on your screen before you today. And I asked you guys, what is your favorite decade for cinema? And what is your favorite 80s action movie? And you know what? I felt like a proud dad, guys. At least 4 people said that their favorite 80s action film was The Terminator. Now, I was trying to be nice and not pick The Terminator as my favorite 80s action film because it's my favorite movie of all time, and I kind of put it more in the sci-fi horror realm, but there is plenty of action in it. It's still an action movie, so obviously, in my opinion, that's the best of the 80s, but if we were to remove that, it's got to be Die Hard, right? And a lot of people did pick Die Hard. Die Hard not only is one of the greatest 80s action movies, it's in the top 3 greatest action films of all time. It changed the game, and it's wildly entertaining. Great performances. I mean, it's a Christmas classic, and if you say it isn't a Christmas movie, I mean, I guess you have no problem with being wrong. It is one of the greatest films ever, so anyone who picked Die Hard, that's a perfect answer too. But there were plenty of other ones. One that really surprised me is a lot of people picked Rambo First Blood 2. That surprised me. I didn't realize that many people like Rambo First Blood 2. I was talking to Matt, and I was like, the only Rambo movie I personally like is First Blood, and I said to Matt, because of his taste in films, is he'll hate First Blood, but he'll like all the other ones when they become just action films. So, you know, everyone's got different taste in movies, and that's what we like to promote around here is, you know what, whatever your taste is, we support that. I love that everyone has different taste in films, and you know, I get a lot of recommendations and movies that I follow up on that I do check out that you guys do recommend, and you've given me some good ones, so I really do appreciate that. Even though this week, you know, we were talking 80s action, so a lot of the same ones. As Macho Man Randy Savage always says, the cream always rises to the top. But anyway, I'll keep rambling because I just love to talk, so we're going to spin this magic wheel and see who this week's 2 lucky winners are. And Luke Callahan. All right. Luke, we're going to remove your name, and we are going to spin again. Wahoo 120. All right, we got 2 first-time winners this week. We got Luke Callahan and Wahoo 120. So congratulations, guys. I feel so bad for Thomas Anderson because he said to me on Twitter this week he's gonna kill or he's gonna destroy that wheel because he gets close every time, and he really got close this week. I was like, of all people, like this week, Thomas Anderson brought up the fact of how close he comes, and it just missed him again. But I don't control the wheel. It's magic, you know, magic controls that, so I have no choice of who the winners are. And man, congratulations to Luke Callahan and Wahoo 120. And if you guys didn't win this week, please come back to this Friday's video. We do this every single week, and this wheel is getting packed full of names. I'm loving it. I never explained this to you guys, but it is a rule here on the channel. If I don't put your name on the wheel, you do get a digital code automatically because it's not your fault your name didn't end up on the wheel. It's my fault. You never even had a shot, and that's on me. So if you ever look and your name isn't on the wheel, just let me know, and I'll send you over your choice of digital codes. But as long as the other winners didn't pick those digital codes, so for Luke and Wahoo 120, since this is your first win, make sure you reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Direct message us there. But the best way is to always reach out to us on our email address, letstalkentmt@gmail.com. Let us know which of those digital codes you want, and again, as long as the other winner didn't take it, that digital code is all yours. So guys, thank you all so much for entering into this digital code giveaway. Hopefully we'll see you on this Friday's video where we can do this all again, and we'll ask you guys some more awesome questions. Looking forward to all of your answers. And if we don't see you till Friday, please enjoy your week, guys. But if you guys do want to support the channel, nothing supports this channel more than by just simply liking this video, subscribing to the channel, going out in those streets, and telling all your friends about us. We'll be seeing you around.